brief introduction to the local context. This week, I don't remember the day, maybe it was Monday or maybe it was Tuesday, the National Congress took the first step towards a bill that aims to prevent undocumented foreigners from access tax benefits. But that is not all. The bill amends law on migration and foreigners and proposed that the registration of foreign migrants in the social register, which is a tool for social economic assessment in Chile, should require a valid identity card. So the which undocumented individuals have not entered. In addition, the bill is proposed that prioritize the regime to the provision of healthcare and access to the education system to nationals over migrants in an irregular situation. So I'm wondering if the next step it will be in their religion, in the case as the Giovanni will present, or the gender identity or gender expression, among others. So today, aims to examine how, through the use and social validation of policies and legal documents, the presence of people who fall outside the nation-state imagination is controlled and persecuted in the public sphere. So I don't add any more. I will present and the word is yours, Giovanni. Okay.
Can you hear me online? Yes. Okay, it's kind of awkward because, but good morning, everybody. Thanks to Vanya for this very nice introduction. Thanks to Professor Mendes for hosting me here in your institute, and thank you for Tunay for accepting to comment on my ongoing work. So today I will present a part of my PhD thesis, which aims in general and understanding how the law can be used to oppress and to, in a certain way, regulate marginalized community. I will present today the case of Monfalcone in Italy, and the other part of my thesis aims to understand the anti-LGBT laws that have been implemented in Hungary, and so the effects on the LGBTQI+ community in the city of Budapest. But today, so I will introduce the case of Monfalcone. This is the outline of today's presentation. I'm sorry, speaking English, but my Spanish is very poor, and so not in line for such presentation. And so I will present the context in which I will try to take you with me, going through some key concepts in understanding why this matters and how I will analyze this concept, then going through some methodologies and also some reflection from the field, and then some preliminary results and some concluding remarks. So today I will present the case of Monfalcone, which is a small industrial town renowned for its shipbuilding industry. Indeed, it's home to Europe's biggest shipyard. It's situated in northeastern Italy, in the city, in the region of Friuli Venezia Giulia, as you can see in the map, and more precisely over here, over here. And so it's in the highest part of the Adriatic Sea. And the population is as follows. You can see we have about 30,000 inhabitants. 1/3 of them are foreign residents. And of these almost 10,000 people, 5,677 are Bangladeshi citizens. Of course, this number do not consider the people that have acquired Italian citizenship over the years. And so the numbers are much higher in terms of the origin of the inhabitants of the city. But the first inflows of migrants in Monfalcone, of Bangladeshi migrants, started in the end of the 90s. We have a number of 17 men at the end of last century, and in over 6 years, you see that the number went very fast high. But the history of Monfalcone teaches that it has always attracted people from outside to work in the shipbuilding industry, so it's not something new. We talk about people coming from the north part of the region at the beginning of last century, from ex-Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, and then from closest region, Veneto and other regions, and then in the 70s and 80s from the southern part of Italy. But the thing changed when people with a different color of the skin start coming, and of course this was problematic, and this is why we're going to talk about it today. But why does it matter? It matters because in 2016, so 10 years ago, Anna Maria Cisint of the Lega Party, which is an Italian far-right populist party, was elected. And following her elections, several municipal regulations and ordinances have been implemented. The first thing that was done when in office was the removal of the benches from the main square that I will then show you in the next slides. But also banning playing cricket in public parks, closure of 2 religious centers in 2 years ago, which was the most problematic part that I will then delve in a little bit in the next slides, but also the closure of parks with gates, also closure of, this is a square that was it's closed with gates all around the square, and after 8:30 p.m. it's not accessible to the public, but only to residents. And so you see how little by little there have been, a regulation and taking space by the municipality. So in 2023, November 2023, so just a little bit more than 2 years ago, the 2 release centers were closed following 2 ordinances. And these ordinances were implemented after several local police checks. We talk about 60 checks per center. So we see how there is an important role of local police or police in general in shaping this context. For example, also asking documents to 12 years old kids. So there's been a kind of very hard control over these places, and the ordinances were targeting these 2 centers because of the designation of the properties. One was commercial and one was official use. But what I want also to tell you is that they were not only closed. By following a regional law, the municipality was able to acquire one of the centers, because this law says that if the owner of the place of the property do not follow what the municipality says, the municipality can acquire the property. But this law was meant to be for example, abandoned houses, or places that could be at risk for the people and from public space. And so you see how the law can be used, in many different ways. Also, it's in a certain way was used in a way that was not supposed, it was not meant at the beginning. So these are some other photos of Monfalcone. This is the main square on your right, and you see there are no benches anymore. So before, 10 years ago, there used to be some trees and benches where mostly Bangladeshi families used to gather and to play and to meet. In this was a meeting point, and it is still a meeting point, even without the benches. But of course, the use of this space has changed. And there are only few spots where people can sit. One is the city hall, which is located in this part of the square. But the municipality doesn't permit people to sit on these steps. In fact, in this sign, you can see it's written in Italian, so it's forbidden to sit on the city hall steps. And also these other signs on your right, it means that you have to carry, you cannot cycle in the square, you have to carry your bike by hand. And this could be reasonable, but the fact is that most of the people do not own a car, so they move around town by bicycle. And so this certainly affects this community. And this is the latest thing that the municipality came out with. And in a certain way, it gives me work to do. But they just renewed this nice place in the highest part of the Adriatic Sea in the port, of Monfalcone with new steps. They're going to open a bar. They planted some trees. But the municipality in January was, mid-January, they came out with this sign. So it's forbidden to sit on the city hall steps. So you see, they spent like millions of euros, but then still there is a control over space and over who can use and how can use these spaces. But why it's important to to understand this concept, and what is the role of the law in shaping this context? So I would like to make some assumptions with you before continuing. So the space we live in is never neutral, is always the result of different factors, cultural factors, social, economic, and so on. And one of these is the law. And so the law contributes to the production of space. But what is the law? So the law should not be conceived as a mere regulatory practice, but is actually more of a performative practice, because by performative I mean that by implementing a law, we embodied it, and so we put it in practice, even if and so it's performative because, of course, we can act according to the law, so I can follow the law, or I can act even beyond mere compliance. But in any way, I act and perform it. So I put it on my body and on my experience of the space. And so I think this quote by Lefebvre, it's very also timely for the context, even though it was 30 years ago, for the context we are living in. So what we call ideology only achieves consistency by intervening in social space and its production. And so the idea is that an ideology, so something we have in our mind, can be put into practice and can achieve consistency only if it comes in social space and the production of this social space. And so I would like to briefly introduce a concept by Matteo Nicolini, who is an Italian legal scholar, who introduced the concept of ideological space, referring to the logical space of Wittgenstein. And briefly, Wittgenstein describes this logical space as this kind of frame through which we see and perceive the world, and the world has a meaning to us, and so it's logical to us. And what he argues is that most of the time, the law is perceived as logical, and so something that describe and perceive the world as it is, and so cannot be disputed in a certain way. But what he argues is that this logical aspect of the law is actually profoundly ideological, and because those in power can use the law to spatialize an idea. And why? Because, as I said before, the law is profoundly performative. And so what I have in my mind, I can put it into practice by intervening in social space, and by the fact that people enact and embody the law. And I think, and this is very important also, as Vanya introduced, in this moment in which, this decade in which right-wing populism and movements have gained traction all over Europe, which is my main focus, but also in Latin America, and we are seeing here in Chile also. And especially, I think, for marginalized communities, so for people who are already at risk, and Vanya actually already introduced this. So, and I think this is really important and very problematic in the time we are living. So this is another sign I think was very interesting, because it says this is in all around the municipality buildings, so you cannot enter these spaces with your face covered. In Italy, there are no laws prescribing this, so it is a municipality regulation. But of course, it targets the community. And so, moving on to what I've been trying to question myself, even though this question have changed a lot. So I've been trying to ask myself and to answer to this main question. So how does the everyday experience of restrictive laws produce condition of invisibility and insecurity? And I've been trying to do this. So this is a bit of my methodology. By here, I want to be very open because I'm still in the process of understanding how to move and what to do with what I experience. To implement this kind of multi-method ethnographic approach, so with semi-structured interviews, but also out ethnography, field diary, mapping, walking methods. So to have a sort of to making different methods and data interact, so not having different pillars and different kind of data to talk on themselves and that's it, but to making them interact. And by this I mean, for example, what I live and what I experience of my ethnography, of my own experience on the field, can also be implementing and can also be experienced during semi-structured interviews. And so I think this was a step I decided to do once in the field, and now I will talk a little bit about this. This is one of my probably 1,000 coffees that I've been trying to drink during my field work, and for this I decided to focus on two main pillars of data and of experiences of the field. So one is to understand the foreign community's perspective, and one to understand my own perspective. And so in terms of my own perspective, the first impact on the field was very hard because there is a very high, in a certain way, level of distrust and so of uncertainty and a feeling of an hostile environment. Also in accessing the field, in talking to people. For instance, in a bar where I drank, no, this is another one, but where I drank a lot of coffees and other things, it took me like 25 times to receive a smile from the person working there. So first of all, because I'm white, and of course it's a barrier, but also because there is an environment in which the municipality and this all regulation have caused people to be from one side or the other to be very distant and not wanting actually to interact too much. And also the access is very difficult because there are no formal groups of associations because the centers were closed. And so also this makes an enormous, it's an issue in accessing the field, but it's also an issue for them because they don't have a meeting point and a formal point in which they can interact. And in this step of understanding my own experience, I think we should give importance to our own experience when on the field and to use it as a data, as a fact that if the field is problematic, it's the access and so on are difficult. This also gives us a sense of what this place is, and we should use it as a data for understanding of the whole situation. But so coming to the first results, and then so the end of the presentation, I would like to to start with this quote from one of the participants of my research. So we were talking about the religious center, so the closure of the religious center, and they told me it was beautiful, and then yes, the mosques are the place where I felt bad, because it's like from one day to the other, like think about your house. There is a room you like, okay? That room has been closed. You can't go anymore. You can go there anymore. And I think yet you see that room every day, but you can't go inside. Isn't kind of sad, right? And I think this, as a geographer, gives us the sense of spatiality that this place, meant for these people. So it was a formal point that was for religious purposes, for social purposes, culture, and so on. And also another participant, they told me it was heartbreaking. They hit us deeply because what was felt is that, I mean, you remove the benches, you closed parks, you whatever you do, you also reduce the number of places for children in kindergarten and nursery school. So of course, they are not accepting their kids, but this was felt as the most problematic and the most heartbreaking experience from their side. But also wanted to understand, therefore, the feeling in the city. So what is the perception of space after this kind of regulation, and how do I experience and feel in the city? And there is a common sense of inadequacy and, this sense of being watched constantly, but also the fact that if a Bangladeshi person does something, then all the community is affected. And so there is also this, it's also a very small environment. So the communication and political communication around it, it's very problematic. And for these reasons, one thing that I found out is that especially young people, to hang out, they prefer to go outside town. So some of them have told me, we just take the car and we go outside. I really don't feel like, going in the city center. And so I think this is very problematic in terms of, of using public space and how I feel in public spaces. But in terms of belonging, there is indeed a very strong attachment to the place, both for, amenities, but also in sense of, I feel it and I feel I belong and I have the right to belong to this place. And I also wanted to understand what are the changes that their life undergone after these regulations, and focusing on the religious part, which again was felt as the most problematic. People now just pray at home, so they do not have anymore a meeting point, where they can meet, or they go outside town. So they go to other cities, Udine and Trieste, which are about 40 an hour away, 45 minutes away from the town. So this is also only some people can access these places because not everybody can drive or have a car. And so there is also problematic. But in terms of changes of the community, this formal meeting point are not only problems for religions, but also, for a social structure of this community. Here I describe community as one, even though, of course, there are different people that arrived 20 years ago, people that arrived 10, or, and also in terms of caste in Bangladesh, there is still also this sense of social levels. But this is in general how the participant describes the community as a one. So I wanted to even though we could argue about this. But what was also problematic, and what it is problematic, is that newcomers do not have any more a reference point, because the center also functioned for, I arrived to the town and I'm looking for a job or housing, or just, wanted to meet people that speak my language. And there is no anymore this place. But also for religious practices, many have told me that it is also a problem, because if people pray at home by themselves, there is also a problem if, continuing practicing and traditions that may be lost, and people just may pray in one way or the other. And so there is also this risk of, continuing religious traditions. And in terms, therefore, I wanted to understand how these people then moved and adapt to this context. And there are no explicit strategies, even though relying on the autonomy of migration scholarship, of course, there might be informal spaces where people meet, and there is this they can still find spaces, but I couldn't, at least at the moment, access these spaces. And one thing that is important is that people are afraid of this context, and also because the local police have been fining and sanctioning kids for playing in public parks, for sitting in spaces. And so there is this fear that, okay, they close our centers, they acquired it, so I don't want to do anything else, because they might gonna find a way to take things from me, or to find me. And so there is this general level of okay, I wait for better times, because now it's a difficult situation. Now we are in the third mandate of this municipality. The first two was with Anna Maria Cisint, but now she was elected in the European Parliament, so her career went on thanks to what she has done in this place, but now there are the same people in the municipality are the same people that were with her. So there is a third mandate with this view of the future of this town. And so I would like to close this presentation by understanding this context with the concept of invisibility, and I see it in two sides here. That we're not marking point, but okay. So from one side there is this institutional invisibility in terms of, as Abel describes it, in terms of the municipality. So those in power can use the law and the tools they have to invisibilize a community, and we've seen it because and there is, as the classification of Abel, explicit exclusion. So the continuous implementation of regulations of removing spaces where people can meet, closing spaces where people used to meet, and so on. But also in terms of representation, notice that in the city hall there is only one person who has Bangladeshi origins, who is now, of course, Italian. And so also in terms of representation, and also I think it connects with what Vanya was saying before, with the fact of we should think a way of going beyond the citizenship as we intended. And from the other side of invisibility, or even more of these two sides I want to describe now, there is also the invisibility that people put in practice. From one side, I don't know what happened, but okay, from one side, as a strategy of protecting themselves, but also in responses to policy. So in responses to policy, for example, they closed the center, so now I stay at home to pray. And in terms of a strategy, for instance, it's also the fact that it's what I felt on the field. So this difficulty of accessing and talking to people, and other person in the interviews have told me that it's a kind of strategy because they don't know if you're a good person or not. They just felt that over the 10 years they have the difficulties in talking to the local people of Monfalcone, and so just to be sure, they just want to put a barrier, and because they fear that maybe something can happen, and so there is this division and setting these walls among people. And so here there were arrows actually, but okay. And so I think that what I'm thinking right now is a kind of circle in which institutional invisibility creates insecurity, which creates invisibility as a strategy or as a condition, which brings back us to more insecurity and more invisibility. And so we are in the possibility of creating a vicious circle in which this could create an even more hostile environment. And with this, I end. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Giovanni. It was a really amazing presentation and moved me a lot. So now is the turn of Tunay.
Now it's my turn. Nice. Shall I go on? So first of all, thank you, Giovanni. It was a really nice presentation. If you need to catch your breath for a second, sip some water. You've been working, so can you all hear me well? Yeah, okay, cool. All right, so yeah, very interesting work. So I'm looking at my notes. I'm in the case of Monfalcone is very interesting because 30,000 in population and 9,000 foreign residents, not including naturalized citizens, is a very interesting ratio for Italy. So I think it's a really interesting case that you picked there, definitely. So I have some notes to potentially maybe like improve this work and maybe some conceptual notes that I have about your methodology and your analysis. So it is interesting because I'm going to repeat some things that I heard from you. So there's a migration from Bangladesh, and the city is known for shipbuilding industry. It's labor heavy, labor intensive work. That's why they were kind of like recruiting workers from different cities, different regions, and finally from Bangladesh. And you are also kind of like drawing a timeline because of the election of Lega Party in 2016, which basically kind of marked this shift in public policy and how the city and municipality itself kind of like managed, especially people's access and use of public spaces. So that's what I understood from your presentation. The two religious centers that you mentioned, they are, I guess, working as mosques, right? Or also like communal spaces for people to organize events, host things. So that was like slightly, yes, partly, I guess, religious centers, not only as mosques, but also, I guess, used for prayer purposes as well. So it might be useful to kind of like underline that a bit. And I wondered like in which like specific like sectarian groups that they come from, Bangladeshi migrants, and if there are any other like Bangladeshi migration to other Italian cities, but probably you talk about it in your introduction because obviously it's a dissertation project. But as a listener, I was just wondering because I didn't know much about this history. So yeah, so, I mean, your note about, I would, of course, definitely, I think using Lefebvre is very smart. You said you're a geographer, so you are interested in how, like, the access to public space is kind of negotiated. So I can see that clearly. One thing that I was wondering is, I mean, your work speaks on migration, but you don't necessarily kind of utilize concepts that are related to migration itself. I mean, you use citizenship, belonging, urban space access, ideological space, visibility, but I mean, there is definitely, I mean, the bigger picture is happening around migration. So maybe including some issues about migration could be helpful or bordering. And this will come to me, like I will return to this topic again when I discuss your conclusion on visibility. So yeah, most of the law is perceived as logical. So I wonder, like I have to read Nicolini's ideological space, but I wonder if people actually perceive law as logical in 2026. I wonder. I mean, so obviously I think we come to a point where law is no longer perceived as logical, but it could be my own perception, but still it would be nice to also if you can kind of engage with this work a bit more critically to ask yourself, okay, is this really the case or is this something that I'm using for the purpose of analysis? But yeah, I wonder what Nicolin actually meant by that. So this was just a question mark. So yeah, and you also referred to Rodriguez Pose. So this was like a very short note that you had right-wing populism in places that quote unquote do not matter. I wonder if this do not matter is about like the provinciality of this little town in Italy, which is, I think, a very interesting and crucial thing that you should definitely highlight because obviously, with the election in Italy, so many people are writing about Meloni's party and far-right populism in Italy, etc. But there is definitely a center-periphery relationship, and not many people are actually looking at like provincial cities in Italy to understand the aspect or the effect of far-rightism. So this could be a very interesting critique that you raise in your work to say, hey, actually, I'm seeing this group of studies, and in this work, I'm looking at this provincial town to understand understand the everyday life of like far-right politics and anti-migrant politics. So I think this could be a really interesting angle that you take in your work. So that's why I think you should definitely engage more with that, more kind of like a recent studies on far-right populism in Italy, but then bring this provincial perspective again to the center. So methodology, yeah, I mean, I'm an ethnographer as well, so I'm somewhat familiar with the tools that you introduced there. So yeah, I guess mapping activities, semi-structured interviews, It's really nice. And you talked about autoethnography. So I wonder, I mean, there's, I guess, maybe kind of an overlap between some tools there. I mean, obviously, like, I mean, you can also use reflexivity, right? To talk about your limitations as a researcher, as a, like you called yourself white and Italian, but it doesn't necessarily have to be autoethnography, maybe unless you're asking questions about your own experience in the city. So there can be some like confusions there between like reflexive field diary versus autoethnography, and how much of it that you actually need or how much of it that you actually use in your project. So it might be nice to like revisit them a little to clean up your methodology. So it is yeah, it translates better in different spaces. But I understand you. I mean, so there is an issue here. So yeah, you mentioned this interesting scene, and I think as an ethnographer, it's important to also maybe pause there a little to think about our encounters in the field. So you said you encountered some hostility because obviously you are perceived as a white Italian person, and maybe you're entering spaces uh, which are like predominant or majority Bangladeshi, and people are maybe not being very friendly to you. But then I think this question brings us to the ethics of ethnography, because non-participation is also a very kind of like a valid way of positioning yourself as a research participant in the field, right? I mean, uh, you want to do a study, of course, but people also don't necessarily have to engage with you in a friendly manner. So I think this issue about like, or maybe what you mean or experience by hostility in the field uh, needs to be unpacked a bit, because I mean, so I mean, people may choose to not talk to you or not engage with you or to neglect you or to, you know, so those things are actually kind of like they have some space in ethnographic field work, and you may also not choose to necessarily analyze these encounters as well. I mean, you may analyze it, but you may also respect research participants' agency to refuse being the subject of research. So this is quite important to, especially when we are working with marginalized groups. I mean, the you understand it, right? The subject of your project may refuse to work with you, and this is a legitimate response as well. And in this case, again, the ethics of ethnography is like you should ask yourself, okay, how much of it I can actually include in my work when they actively refuse to engage with me. And clearly, some people did engage with you because you conducted interviews. But in moments where you faced maybe refusal, just make sense of that refusal in a meaningful way. Because at the end of the day, we are not journalists, right? So you have to really guide yourself in the field. And I think using reflexivity and positionality and intersectionality, like those type of tools, can be very helpful in navigating this field where you are perceived as an outsider, but obviously you have access because you are Italian, so you understand some other dynamics. So yeah, I mean, all these things can be can improve your work, I think, in a great way. But you have to make sense of them in a sensible way, and maybe autoethnography may not be the right tool to do that, because you don't want to center your experiences when you are trying to talk about like marginalization of group A or B. I mean, they're already invisibilized and underrepresented. So if you as the Italian researcher like use or like overuse autoethnography as a method to talk about their experience, then it's also quite unfair. You are again reproducing the same system of invisibilization. But I think it is yeah. Having said that, it was just a point that I observed, but I'm sure you will handle it. Um, but yeah, I guess a question for you here would be like, what was your recruitment process like? Did you do like snowballing? Did you go and talk to people? And I guess as an urban studies person, I would be interested in if they have like if there are any like quote unquote ghettoification of certain areas in the city, like are they like more Bangladeshi heavy neighborhoods or streets where they choose to live? Do they have markets and restaurants where they sell mostly like ingredients or foods, or kind of like a yeah, goods like exported from Bangladesh. So I wonder, like, if and do you have access to these spaces as a researcher? So yeah, that was, I guess, the question that I had listening to your methodology. And let me wrap up now. How to develop its work? Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, summarizing my comments, like, you can further develop this work by connecting it to larger sociopolitical issues. As I said, especially like studies looking at Italy and Europe, and this the missing part about center-periphery relationship when it comes to far right. Better establish the aspect of migration in your project. Yeah, this you can do it by looking at maybe the work of Niro Yuval Davis, bordering practices, or Mesadra, Nicolas de Genova, legality, production of migrant legality. So because migration is definitely there, but it is not spelled out enough, and I think it can really help you to situate the importance of your work. And yeah, what else do I have? Improve and sharpen your methodology and your conceptual framework. There might be some concepts that are not extremely useful in your analysis, but just revisit them. I think you will have a better sense of them in your analysis for sure. Offer more nuances in the way that you describe your field notes. So this could be helpful, because when I listen to your when you like showed us some scripts from the interviews, just try to show the heterogeneity of the group that you work with. Like, I mean, I wondered about their demographic backgrounds, like their age, how many years they spent in Italy, whether they're Italian were fluent, how many times do they go to Bangladesh, like, whether they were married. So those type of information could be very helpful when you work with interview material or present interview material. So maybe next time, like participant 5, and you can tell us a little bit about participant 5, and you can say this person is actually 38-year-old man who works here and there and spends 6 years in Italy, said this. And then this could really help us to better understand the interview material. And I wonder, one of the last questions. You talked about like the impact of the closure of the center, and it is something that you can trace, and it's an event. But I wonder, like, if like what happens in other special festivities like Ramadan, or like, it's just, do they use other spaces, like, because maybe you can also include, I mean, if you have material, obviously, because we had Ramadan last month, but if you encountered in your field that people like maybe use these spaces or use public spaces in different times for different purposes, it could also maybe deepen your analysis. So I just wondered if there's any like special times of the year that this issue comes to discussion for the community as well. Um, yeah, and finally, issue about invisibility. Is it invisibility, or is it like, is it hypervisibility? Because obviously, making something invisible would also require not acknowledging the issue, but it seems like there's an active erasure of these subjects from the public spaces, to a point where when you walk in the city, you constantly see signs, right? So it is, I mean, the signs are very visible now, because, and also the park has this is what do you call it, like fences. So there is something, I mean, maybe the city or municipality itself is trying to kind of manage who has access to the public spaces, and maybe hoping that these people won't have access to these public spaces. But while doing that, they're also making something, like they're addressing this issue constantly. So I wonder if invisibility is what's happening there, or is it like strategic invisibility, or is it like certain strategies adopted by this community to navigate their everyday life? So maybe it's about like agency there. Like, I mean, just think about it a bit. Like, what does the idea of visibility or invisibility do in your project, or whether it is the right concept to use to describe this issue, this phenomena. Yeah, so but overall very interesting field work. I'm really happy to like learn more about it, and on my next trip in Italy maybe I also make a stop and see it for myself. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tunay, for your interesting comments. It was really interesting comments, I think, in particular in the field of the migration studies. But I would like to give a couple of minutes for Giovanni answers in this case if you want. And after that, I would like to open the space for discussion and comments because also it is a space is for discuss, is for comment. I would like to remember that it is a work in progress. So part of the process, comment, discuss, orient, provide some guidelines, this type of thing. So thank you so much, Tunay. So now is.
Okay, so thank you Tunay, for the amazing comments. There are quite a lot. My brain is going on now. Um, so I will start from the beginning a little bit, and probably I will miss something you said. So yeah, maybe I didn't manage to underline better the function of the centers, but of course it was a wide use. So it's not only religious, but many others. So after schools for children, social gathering, also festivities, and so it's much more. In terms of you said that maybe people don't perceive the law as logical, but I think there is right now also if we think about international law, we are missing some points. So absolutely, this is an actually timely comment. But in general, I think that we are moved by the fact that if the law says something, I may not follow it, but in general, I'm attentive to what it says. So probably we are living in a moment in which the law in general it may be losing a bit of the power, but still I think it has, people think about it in a certain way. But probably I have to focus more critically on these concepts. And about Rodriguez Poe's work, it was, 10 years ago, I think the work, or 8 years ago. So yeah, it shows how, especially in the places that do not matter in terms of provinciality, so not main cities, how far right movements have acquired power. And I think this is actually what happened specifically in Monfalcone, because it was one of the only cities, like bigger cities in the region, that were left wing because of work movements in town. And so we have this strong shift to the other part, very strong. So I think it's a perfect example of this matter, and probably I should focus more on this. But the idea of choosing also this case is first and foremost because I'm from another town close by, so it was something that I lived as a this narrative of this Monfalcone, an invasion, and blah blah. And so what was a sort of attachment also to this place, but also because it was a midtown size for Italian context with this kind of population. So I think was interesting, and this shift in also the political party. Yeah, in going instead to the methodology, I think you were absolutely right, and probably I should reflect more on the fact that with I don't want to put my own experience as the the center of this, because otherwise I would do the same. I would take power in a place that it is maybe not good to do. So of course this is not my aim. My aim, and probably I should read it better. The aim is that the idea, more than the aim, is to take these experiences as part of the research process, not as the result, because otherwise I would center on myself, which I'm white and et cetera. And so the idea is to not to focus on it, but to see it as kind of result of the research, but as a part of the processes. But also the hostility. By hostility, I don't mean that people refuse to be part of the research, which is totally fine, of course, in terms of the ethic of the research is totally fine. And of course, there is an agency of people in deciding whether to be part or not of the research. But it's really in also very small and micro interaction in which this is what I mean by hostility. So it's not in terms of, okay, I don't want to be part of your research, which is of course okay, but it's more of the micro processes and micro interactions when in town. But probably I have to focus better and to look better at the literature. And so the autoethnography, it's not to overuse my experience, but is for me to understand better also how I feel in the context, and how also as a sort of improvements in understanding this concept. I use mainly snowballing as methodology to access people. And I note something you asked about ghettification. So there is not much in terms of housing. So people live mainly all around town, and so there is not like a place of town where mostly Bangladeshi people live, and it's really like very fragmented. So in a building you can find Italian with Italian origins, Italian with foreign origins, or foreigners. So it's kind of very mixed in that sense. But there are some streets in which they have shops. They have open shops specifically with products from Bangladesh, or other kind of products. And so, but it's very like few places. It's like 4 shops, or kind of some restaurants. Yeah, you mentioned the work of Mezzadra, so the autonomy of migration scholarship. Of course, I didn't have the time to delve in now, but it's something that I'm exploring in understanding also this context with the view of migration scholarship. And to end, you asked something about okay, no, sorry. Another thing about methodology, I mainly work with people that have been in town for quite a while. So 20 years, or no, some less, but mainly people who have born in Bangladesh, coming like in the 2007. So in that moment, so are now a bit more like 30 years old or 50 years old. So they come later in life. So I've not been in touch with people like that arrived recently in this place. And in terms to end about the invisibility or upper invisibility, I think it's a perfect comment, because it's something that I'm really thinking about it. But because also in the literature there is this division, so it's of course strategic invisibility. So and at the same time making them very visible, so pointing fingers to, oh, look at that. So it's hyper visibility, but at the same time, in terms of the actions are in a way aiming to invisibilize, so to taking space from them. So they acquired space over the time. Now I'm taking that from you. So I think it's both. Maybe I have to work more on this double these two dimensions of it. So thank you. I mean, I didn't answer to everything probably, but thank you again for your precious comment.
Thank you, Giovanni, for comments. So now I would like to open the floors for questions, comments, more reflexivity, positions. I don't know, whatever you want.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I enjoyed your work because I was involved in a very similar project, like 2 projects before in the past, like 10 years ago. It was about what we call institutional effects as a critics to the a criticism to the neighborhood effect thesis, which is not related to what you're doing. You're doing more about like repressive spaces. But in that case, we were trying to explore the agency of institutions in general, including inaction. I mean, not doing nothing. So maybe a question for you, if you're considering law as a metaphor of several type of things, because you mentioned specific ordinances of removing benches, for example. But the action of institutions or the action of municipalities could be in very different ways with very different instruments. Some of them could be written, some of them could be approved as a law, or some of them could be just the action of a police officer or somebody else. So maybe is that like a metaphor of several type of instruments or other types? And or if you're looking at some ways of inaction or negligence, maybe that could affect people's behavior in those spaces. Just that comment or question at the same time.
So thank you very much. Yeah, I think in the work citing Able in 2023, they give like I think it's very nice in this sense, a different classification of how institutions react to migration. It's specifically, but in terms of the agency of institution, as you were saying, in acting and also regulating space. And of course there have been different actions. I wanted to focus on the law because it's written on paper, so it's but of course there are other aspects, political communication, social medias. And for instance, was last year, I think during Ramadan, they hang in 2 or 3 places of town as advertising the political party with like big signs of Islam is gonna destroy us and something. So of course there are other actions, but I wanted to focus on this because it was more in a certain way, no, not real, but I don't know. It was there. It was prescribed. It was on paper. So it was from one side more easy to analyze. From the other side, it was more effective because I mean, in my idea is that the law gives us the sense of the prescription is something more rigid, more on the ground. So that's. But of course, there are many other things in terms also of like not allowing this community to celebrate other festivities and giving them space. But so there are of course different other actions.
Thank you, Giovanni. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. It was very nice. And I was thinking, you started your presentation talking about this sort of attacks toward the public spaces. And these attacks by law, by users of the public spaces, only highlights the importance of the public spaces itself in socialization and identity, etc. So then you start thinking about talking about your field work and saying that it's very problematic. I imagine it should be very hard. But in a sense, I think that all field works are problematic. It's very hard to be on the field. For any researcher, you don't know how to proceed at the beginning. You don't know what to do if you take pictures, if you only get notes, if you talk to people, you don't know what to do. So I am Brazilian, and I'm very familiar with the work of, I don't know if you know this researcher, he's called Rogério Proença Leite, and he did a research in the city of Recife about gentrification. It's not about law, but the uses of the city changed a lot, of course, because of the market, the private initiatives, and in simple words, all the poor people that were living there couldn't live there anymore because the prices of the soil got so high and they were expelled in a certain way. It's a situation that it's similar to yours. So I was thinking about this concept of Rogério Proença Leite, which is called contrausos de los espacios. If in your field work, the question is, if in your field work you could perceive some sort of this contrausos del espacio público, and if you did perceive what are them, and I think there are good signs of negotiation with the law, and this attack to public spaces, this concept of invisibility could help you in a sort of way. They're kind of a resistance to this enforcement, law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. So no, again, I don't want like to. I think it's. I want to focus on this because I don't want when I say I take my reflections and my, I don't. No. In general, like I don't want to say, oh, poor me. I have to go through this deep. No, it's not about absolutely like I'm privileged. I mean, it's not absolutely about that. It's more of, this gives us a sense of what is the situation. Yeah, absolutely. It's not like, oh, poor me, look what I have to go through. Absolutely not. And yeah, this gives us a sense of the importance of public space. Absolutely. Also, there is a book who came out last year by two Italian researchers, and they look at the importance of regulating public and private space, and the importance of both in this context of plurality in which we live, of course. Okay, I didn't know about these researchers, so maybe then I can get the quote. And so this contrauso is like about other ways of using. Okay. I think I'm actually like thinking about the resistance of the law. So there is no I think resistance in terms of protesting of that, but I think it's very small resistance. So still kind of using public space, but is like lit in a different way, but still using them. So there are no kind of very explicit ways of resisting, which I think it's problematic, and also in terms of silencing people, but also but yeah, people still use and still go on the street, and like also in the square, they still use it even though they cannot sit anyway. So there is still this resistance, but in small practices, I think, and it's a very silent resistance. It's not loud. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Okay.
Now I think it's okay, but the last step is anyone has any question during in the Zoom call. I see an comment for Emilio. I don't know if you want to, if Emilio want to speak and open the phone.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And I'm just will say what I wrote on the chat. So maybe thinking that this is related to space will be really nice to have a kind of mapping or map of the city, like from your interviews. Uh, Putting the places that were used before and how these places maybe it's change of location in the city. So that will be something that in terms of image will be really nice for your audience, and to try to understand how it's changing the patterns of use of the city. And then also maybe, I don't know, if you have some registers or pictures of the all situation of use of the space where Bangladesh people is using this as public spaces, and then pictures from nowadays. If they change, if you have in the pictures before a kind of feeling of invasion from Bangladesh people or not, like trying to show in images what was happening in terms of use of the space, because your pictures now they show like the regulations or is not allowed, but you don't see people using these spaces. So I think will be nice to have this information. And also maybe something that could be useful for you too, it's trying to show in a kind of chart or something what is the composition of the inhabitants of the city, because you said that many people from outside they came, but now they are like they feel like Italian, but maybe they have different origins. So maybe the percentage of people from, I don't know, outside, there is a 10% of people from ex-Yugoslavia, and then there is a 5%, like something like this that can show you a kind of picture of what happened in terms of inhabitants in the city, and try to understand this percentage of people from Bangladesh, how much it is in the city. I think it's just information that you can give to your audience in order to understand better the picture of the problem. I think will be useful. But thanks for your presentation. It's quite interesting.
Thank you very much. I actually have a map that I'm building, but I mean I didn't show it now, where I'm mapping all these kind of regulations and so all around town, but it's not ready yet. So this is why I'm building it. No, in terms of pictures, I actually don't have pictures of the past. And I didn't think about it, so probably I can think of finding these pictures. I guess that what has changed in general more than the actual uses of public spaces is how people use it and the feeling that people have in using. So of course there is also less use of public space, but it's also how I go in the public space and how I use it. So I think it's more the perception and the feeling of public space. In terms of the composition of the city, here I put it only the the numbers of Bangladeshi community, because it's the highest number of the foreign population. The second highest is Romanian, but it's a Italian trend, which is the biggest community of foreigners. But in Italian Statistical Institute, we have a limitation because we don't have data of the people with double citizenship. So we only have, you are maybe from Chile, but you became Italian, and we only have the data of Italians. So we don't have, the data of the double citizenship. And we only, also of the people who acquire citizenship, we only have regional data. And so we know that, for example, in the region in 2024, 470 people from Bangladesh acquired Italian citizenship. And we can assume that most of them are there. But of course, because the population of Bangladesh in the region are mostly like 90% there, but so we don't have the exact numbers of, so there is this limitation, but yeah, probably I can also put the other communities present in the, but with this limitation of, people that are already Italian and people that are yet not. So there is this kind of limitation in the data.
The last one, I think, because we need them.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. I think both of the questions that were made here are really related with how you approach to law. And I think you should, for me, Wittgenstein could present a certain one-dimensional approach to law because it's a frame that it's opposed to the will of the people and constrain the way in which you conceive to live in society. So, for instance, from the law perspective, Professor Herbert Lionheart proposed the internal and external perspective of the law. So when we explain about how the law imposes things to communities, we are talking about the external point of view of the law being like enforced to the people. But when we think about the internal point of view of the law, we could see, for instance, contrausos, or we can see, for instance, how these communities try to deal with the situations that they are living. So when the communities don't only think, oh, this is the law, I'm going to act like it, but at the same time, they think things and they act in consequence. For instance, they could question the situation, they could protest, and maybe they could create or live a difficult, like psychological approach in the way of the law being imposed. So I think it would be really helpful to the research to include maybe this approach that goes beyond of the only thing of the law being imposed, but at the same time how communities deal in practical and psychological ways with the imposing of the law.
Thank you. So I think it's okay. So we really enjoyed this session, and we in general really appreciate Giovanni and me and Lula. I really appreciate your company and the comments in person, online also. And in this moment, I think I would really like to express, Giovanni, thank you so much for your interesting work, for your courage, for sharing with us your work in progress. So thank you so much. Thank you so much Tunay and all people connected today with us. So, muchas gracias por estar acá. Muchas gracias, Giovanni. Fue un placer.
Thank you very much to everybody, and also to Vanya, to Lula, and to Tunay for your precious comments. Thank you, and see you.